So welcome, friends. I'm John, Father John Deere, and this is another Zoom session with the Beatitude Center for the Nonviolent Jesus with our special guest today, the great Sister Simone Campbell. You can find many other upcoming Zoom programs at www.beatitudecenter.org. First, let me ask everyone to be sure to mute yourselves and to write questions for Sister Simone in the chat link. I'm hoping she'll speak for at least 45 minutes, and then we'll offer any comments, or you can ask her questions yourselves, and later we'll send out the Zoom recording link. I'll stay on for a few minutes afterwards if anyone would like to debrief. So let's begin with a little prayer, as we always do. So I just invite everyone just to sit back, maybe close your eyes, take a deep breath, um, and notice how you're feeling, and to invite the Holy Spirit to be here with us. And dear friends, I invite you into the presence of the God of peace who loves you infinitely and personally and wildly. And let's welcome the nonviolent Jesus here into our hearts and our circle. Just take a moment to ask for whatever graces of peace, hope, and love that we need. Beloved God, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect with Sister Simone on your call to follow the nonviolent Jesus and carry on in his Holy Spirit. Bless us, disarm us, heal us, inspire us, enlighten us, strengthen us, and send us forth to go forward and do our part to help end systemic injustice, poverty, war, authoritarianism, white supremacy, genocide, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, and all that goes against your will, that we might do your will and be who you created us to be, your holy beatitude people, your Holy Spirit, your holy peacemakers. And I ask this in the name of the nonviolent Jesus, amen. So welcome again, dear friends. I'm very happy to welcome to the Beatitude Center my friend, Sister Simone Campbell. She's one of our leading voices and organizers for social and economic justice in the United States. A Roman Catholic sister of social service, she's a religious leader, attorney, author, and recipient of the 2022 Presidential Medal of Freedom. She has extensive experience in public policy rooted in her lived experiences working with people at the economic margins of society. Currently, she's an Emerson elder at the Emerson Collective, focusing on political healing. But for 17 years, you may know her as the executive director of Network, the great Catholic lobby for social justice. She was the founder and leaders of the famous Nuns on the Bus and traveled around the country in this bus, which was a real limo of a bus, calling everyone to justice. And her work for healthcare made all the difference, as many people have concluded, in the passage of the Affordable Care Act, of course, which is under total attack right now as we're recording this. Before that, she spent 18 years as founder of the Oakland Community Law Center, where she advocated for the poor in the courts. So she has a lot of experience on the ground. And she's also served as a leader of her religious community and now serves on their governing council. She's the author of two really great award-winning books. The famous one you might have seen, Nuns on the Bus, but this new one recently from Orbis called Hunger for Hope, which I highly recommend. And by the way, everyone on this podcast can call Orbis or go on their website and get a 30% discount by saying you're a friend of the Beatitude Center. And there's a secret code. And I'm getting old. I think I've forgotten. It's either the TBC for the Beatitude Center or TBA. But in either case, you'll get a big discount. So get the book, Hunger for Hope. And you can write me if neither of those work, but I'm pretty sure something's going to work. So, Simone, thank you so much for being here. You're among friends, and it's a great pleasure and a blessing for all of us. So, dear friends, please join me in giving a rousing, warm round of applause and welcome to Sister Simone Campbell. And then I'm going to mute myself. And the floor is yours, Simone.
Oh, thanks, John. What a treat. As I was preparing for today, I was thinking things we learned during COVID is that Zoom and relationships can be nourishing for the actual continuance of community. And I think, at least for myself, I know that community is the anchor point for much of what I do. And my religious community uh, is Sisters of Social Service, but we're in the US, Mexico, Taiwan, and the Philippines. But during COVID, we figured out if we did 7 p.m. Eastern time, it was 7 a.m. in the Philippines and Taiwan, and we could all get together on Zoom. And so it became actually a gift, though I have to confess it's a little annoying because I'm a person who goes to bed early, and so staying up till 9:30 in dialogue with my beloved sisters sometimes gets a little wearing. But I think that the community that we've been able to build across the country, but also across nations, is a real contribution to us in these very challenging times. Now, okay, so this is prayer and nonviolence. I don't know, have you noticed that it's really hard to actually be nonviolent at this moment? I find it quite difficult. I live in DC, and I must bless me, brothers and sisters, for I did sin. The first time I saw the National Guard, which is sort of walking around the streets, down on the metro platform as I was waiting for my train, you know what? I had this big temptation to push him in front of the train. It was like, get out of my city, just leave. I was so shocked at myself being so thoughtful, reflective, prayerful, nonviolent until I meet the National Guard. And what I realized was that the use of military is really triggering that belief that violence is the way forward, that it's conflict, that it's what we need to do is fight back. So I wanted to share with you a story from my one of my retreats. It was back to actually the retreat that gave rise to the bus, the first bus trip. Back in December of 2011, I was on retreat. I was being my spiritual self, and individually directed meditation retreat. And my retreat director, this Redemptorist priest, was encouraging me to radical acceptance because I was so annoyed at the Republicans at that time in Congress. Uh, and so my image of who I had the hardest time accepting at that time was Mitch McConnell. I really thought he was a mistake of God. You know, God on an off day, a model not to be repeated. I mean, did you notice he didn't have lips? I mean, he doesn't have lips. Anyway, so I brought to prayer this idea of radical acceptance, and I'm sort of chuckling because it was like, yeah, right, yeah, right. But what happened was a softening of my heart. And what I realized was that in this moment of conflict, how did I see him as a child of God and heir of heaven? And it was like, well, he's not. I'm sure God doesn't want him. You know, it really doesn't. But where it came to me was that if I didn't welcome him, how could I welcome anybody else? That if I had a heart big enough to take him in, then I've got room for everybody. And that's the glorious thing about a meditation practice, is that it opens us up to be bigger, broader, welcome in those that we want to leave out. So I go back, it's retreat, so you go back and meet with your teacher. And I said, oh, radical acceptance. This is really wonderful. And then Pat, my teacher, says to me, okay, now add in fighting. Fighting? Nonviolence? Fighting? What do you mean, fighting? Well, he just said, well, go meditate. It was like I was sputtering. I was continuing to sputter. But what happened for me was as I sputtered and complained and railed and did all the things that we do to avoid insight, what I came to realize that fighting too often is fighting against. We say we're going to push back against something. And if you push back against something, you get stuck because you're pushing back. So the other side's going to push, and then you're going to push and push. And you don't have you can't stop pushing back, because if you do, then they're going to just push ahead. So you get caught. You both get caught. And what I came to realize is rather than fighting against, the challenge is rather to stand shoulder to shoulder and fight for a vision, to articulate a shared vision of what's wrong. But do you know what I discovered? The hard part of that means you have to get close to the people you're fighting with. And it's like, ew, I didn't like that at all. Well, what I came to discover was that it's really the only way to find ways forward and not get caught in this fighting against is to be in proximity. And so on our first bus trip, the bus was so much fun, and I know some of you know about it and are connected with it. And well, I'll tell you, my favorite part started. So we did 7 bus trips, and in 2014 was the first year that we had people sign the bus. So it started in 12. We did that on Paul Ryan's budget. 2013 was immigration, when we were trying to get a bill out of the Senate, which we did, but then it wouldn't be brought up in the House because of John Boehner. But anyway, that's another story. And then in 2014, we did voter turnout. And we had people, if you committed to vote, you could sign the bus. And that became this fabulous sacrament of signing the bus, because it was putting yourselves on the bus, and everybody was on the bus. But in that process of the first bus trip, railing against Paul Ryan's budget, I was speaking out against Paul Ryan's budget all the way around the country, and how it wasn't a vision for the U.S. and blah, blah. So his people reached out to me and to my office and said, well, he'd like to meet with Sister Simone. And when I got back, it was in July, come at noon, come alone, don't bring the press. That was like, it was really funny. I felt like it was the shootout at the OK Corral, come at high noon. And what happened, though, is in the process of this realizing to fight for a vision, that my goal was to, rather than oppose him, was to stand next to him and ask what he saw, and be able to tell him stories of people we'd met on the road that were going to be adversely impacted by his policies. And the other thing that I learned in the beginning part of the meeting, he was trying to impress me. And so he said that he didn't have an apartment in DC, that he kept his family in Janesville, and he slept on the couch in his office. But what I had to do in radical acceptance was hold a heart for him. And so I said to him, well, is that good for you or your family? How do you ever get a break? This place is a pressure cooker. And holding a concern for him, even though we dramatically disagreed on policy, created a tie that then allowed us to articulate kind of some shared perspectives. And so when he started talking about his program to cut food stamps and all this. I told him about a family we had met who would be adversely impacted, that is, their teenage kids wouldn't be able to get food. He says, but they're not the targets of my program. Yeah, but they're going to be your victims. Oh. So what we were able to do was to at least begin to articulate together what his concerns were. And the old mantra, waste, fraud, and abuse. There is hardly any waste, fraud, or abuse in the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Zero. Everybody gets an electronic benefits card. You can only use them at, the registered places. There's no waste, fraud, or abuse. That's just a conservative talking point. And so being able to give them some data, to tell him about people, and to care about him allowed me to at least begin a conversation with him that continued over the next years that he was in Congress. Even when he was speaker, he'd periodically, we'd connect. He didn't forget me, that was for sure. But the piece that was so important, I think, is to fight for a vision where you try to articulate that vision together. And that's what the bus was always about, was going to places, lifting up people who were working, making a difference at the margins of our society, and then going to lobby their local representatives. And I have all kinds of stories, and some of you have probably been involved in some of those meetings, but it was a way to make concrete this idea that we could fight for a vision together. Now, this became really important after I left Network. So when I left Network, I'd been there 17 years. It was sort of like my child, only it wasn't going away to college. So I needed to leave because it needed new leadership, fresh blood. And if you don't know Network, look them up, networklobby.org. They continue to do really great things in these challenging times. So what I wanted to do was to use this idea of radical acceptance and fighting for a vision and create dialogue between conservatives and progressives. Because I thought the problem was we weren't talking to each other. And I found two other guys who were interested in doing it, and we got started, and I know a bunch of conservative people around the country, so I was inviting these mostly pastors to join us. Do you know, out of the maybe 35, 40 conversations I had with conservatives, nobody would join us. Oh no, sister, I couldn't join you. I couldn't be public like that. Well, you don't have to be public. You just have to come to a group. Oh no. I could talk to you, but I couldn't do that. And I was really puzzled. But what happened was that then I said I had to have a different design. My design of getting conservatives and progressives together wasn't working. So after about, I don't know, 11 months of trying to make it, where you try to really make it work and you have this great idea and it's clearly not working. Back to the drawing board, which for me is kind of meditation, practice, consider what's the spirit trying to tell me in this moment. What I realized was that I was asking, okay, I had a ton of progressive friends that wanted to be in dialogue. But to ask conservatives to be in dialogue was to ask them to do something that was scary, too hard, too much of a stretch, that they couldn't do it. So where that led me was maybe I was being asked to do something that scared me. That if this was easy for me to have dialogue, what was scary? And so meditation, holding that, you know how that is, where you just hold what's scary? Where am I being called? I looked at the map of the United States. I'll tell you, what scared me was the South, going to the South. And what I ended up doing as a result of that was taking my book, Hunger for Hope, and setting up book things at bookstores, independent bookstores in the South. And the goal was not for me so much to talk about my book, but to get people together as a way to educate me about the South so that they could come together and explain, talk about, reveal their communities. I'll never forget, my second one was in Greensboro, North Carolina. South Carolina. Sorry. I get my Carolinas confused sometimes. South Carolina. And at this bookstore downtown, and beautiful town. And they had this huge, what do you call them? Monolith? Sort of like the Washington Monument, except a column, big column downtown. And I thought, uh-oh, I was afraid that was for the Civil War. And well, I wasn't going to like what it said, I didn't think. But I went up to it and discovered it was for the Revolutionary War. I had no idea that the Revolutionary War was fought in the South. And I mean, that was sort of the beginning of my education. And what it was a monument for the South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, and New Hampshire battalion, or I don't know, I don't know the military, folks, troops that fought together against the British in South Carolina. It began my education. Now, what I want to talk about in that is the willingness to face into what scares us. And right now, there's a lot scaring us, or scaring me, and I assume us. I find myself terrified by this administration, by this Congress, and feeling pretty powerless. Anyway. But when we face into what scares us and go, my fervent prayer is very profound. It goes like this: help, help. It's the wee small voice inside, help. But when asking for help, the thing that I've learned is that the Spirit gives the help we need. So let me tell you some of the things that I discovered in my tour in the South to what scares me. People told me in the South, in many different locations that I went, people from the South don't travel north or west. But people from the North don't travel south. Nobody comes to visit. We don't cross those lines. I found out in Mississippi that the schools are still segregated for the most part. And the white schools are called segregation academies. And many, if not most, of the Catholic schools are segregation academies. I found that shocking. But then I discovered it. I was in Columbus, Mississippi at this wonderful bookstore. We had a great gathering. Even the mayor of Columbus came to our book gathering. And they, in the group was a woman who had taught at a segregation academy, but had retired from there and now had gone to teach in the public schools. And she discovered that the public schools were great, fabulous. And she was trying to recruit other teachers to come to the public school. Because the segregation academies were white, the rumor was they were good schools, but didn't have much funding, didn't have much books, seemed complicated problems. Another one that really confused me was, confessing my ignorance. I thought Oklahoma was the South. Turns out Oklahoma is not the South because it didn't become a state until 1912. So it was just a territory. But the territories fought on the side of the Confederacy And the Cherokee Nation, who had always felt so terrible about the Veil of Tears. Remember the story of the Cherokee March and the forced relocation and all of that? What I hadn't known until I got there and was talking to some of the Cherokee folks, that on the Trail of Tears, they brought their African American slaves. What? How complicated? How complicated? White folks forcing the relocation of the Cherokee bringing their African American slaves, and now the Cherokees continue to wrestle with who's Cherokee when they have mixed race kids and families. When I faced into what scared me, I discovered human beings with a lot of questions, a lot of mixed experiences, and a lot of surprises that we would not talk about in a formal, distanced kind of thing. That what it was required was a willingness to get close, to connect. And then what I realized in reflecting on the gospel, when you look at the gospel, Jesus is forever getting close. He goes to the blind guy that's calling out, and the apostles are trying to get him to shut up. I could just really relate. And Jesus gets close and says, well, what do you need? What do you want? Oh, Lord, that I might see. But it takes proximity. Or the 10 lepers wanting to be healed. Or the centurion, please heal my son. And you've got power. You don't even need to come, just heal. But it's drawing close. And so I came to realize that my heart is softened and I'm much less judgmental when I draw close. Now, here's the problem. Not everybody wants me close. Sometimes I have a tendency to get too close too fast. And I try to think, oh, it'll work out in the end. But I'll never forget this guy I met in Indianapolis. This is while I was still at Network. In 2016, it was first Trump campaign. And he was so for Trump. He was really angry. Ooh, he was really angry and upset. And I go, well, what's upsetting you? And he goes, well, my parents always told me if you worked hard, played by the rules, you'd get ahead. And I worked hard, played by the rules, but I didn't get ahead. And it's not any better for my kids. And they went to college and they can't find good jobs and they have to move back home and we're all trying to pay off their school debt. And I mean, it's terrible. But my parents always said, if you worked hard, played by the rules, you'd get ahead. And so he must have said that about his parents, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And I finally said to him, this where I think the Holy Spirit was around, well, it sounds like you're concerned that you disappointed your parents. Is that true? And bam, he got tears in his eyes. I was so surprised because anger had been his dominant presenting piece, but it was so clear, the pain that he carried. And it led me to realize this mantra, work hard, play by the rules, you'll get ahead. That really made sense after the 1930s and into the 40s, the 50s even, the 60s. But now, in a society where the income and wealth disparity by design is growing larger and larger, where the rich are getting richer and richer, and middle class and low-income folks are sinking further and further, it's no longer true. Work hard, play by the rules, you'll get ahead. It's not true. but we keep saying it, or people keep believing it. And that feeling of personal disappointment that he had personally disappointed his parents gave a personal narrative to what is a societal structural problem. The structural problem of our tax policy, of wealth, of the dislocation. That's how you know I'm a politician type. But we'll talk tax policy anytime I can, because that's part of the problem. That the big, beautiful bill made permanent the 2017 tax bill. And not only that, gave additional tax benefit to the top 1%, while at the same time taking away the financial supports to buy your health insurance on the exchange, reducing Medicaid expenditures, reducing SNAP benefits, cutting education opportunities, doing anything for anybody else other than the 1% is currently not in vogue politically. If you work hard, play by the rules is no longer true. But what is true in this group is the challenge to work together, to make a difference, to stand shoulder to shoulder and articulate together what do we see, and then engage for the needs of those who are too often left out. Pope Leo picked up an exhortation that Pope Francis was working on. I don't know if you all had a chance to see it, but it's kind of great. One, the thing that made me happy is, I forget exactly how he said it, but he said something about that Pope Francis was his dear and revered predecessor, which was like, oh, I'm so glad he liked Pope Francis. It was just really nice. And then he goes on to talk about the history of 2,000 years of the message, of the Christian message being caring for those who are left out. It's really an exquisite expose of our responsibility in a Christian tradition to respond to the needs of those around us. But what it has, for me, what it picks up in this really challenging time is how important it is for each of us to find what is ours to do. And that prayer, that desire to know where and how to act together. So anyway, I forgot what I said on the podcast, so I hope this isn't a repeat if you listen to the podcast, or we'll just consider it a review. But the only way that we can move forward is in community. And in community, that's where we can find hope in these very challenging times. In 2024, I did a series of, what was scaring me was Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And those of you that are political type folks, you can figure out why in 2024 that was scaring me. So I took my book and we went to several bookstores in those states. But I'll never forget being in Muskegon, Michigan, up on Lake Michigan. Great crowd. I'd always had a group of maybe 12 to 18 people to do these conversations. This was the first time we did it in a library. We had 83 people show up. I was like, oh, so much for my intimate conversation. But it turned out to be fabulous. We had a great conversation. But I'll never forget this one guy. I was getting them to explain to me about Muskegon and their history and how they were community. And he said, well, you know, some cities in Michigan, they got really fancy grass. Well, we had just come from Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is, so I knew exactly what he was talking about. It felt like the grass had been combed. It was so pristine. And so I was laughing. He says, yeah, but here in Muskegon, we're crabgrass. Some of us are crabby, and all of us have crabgrass as part of our personalities. And I was thinking about that, how tough that makes them, how engaged, how persistent crabgrass is. So that learning that in community, they could be tough together, they could be determined together. The importance of crabgrass not being too precious, but being real and down to earth is critically important for this time. So hope, as my book says, is a communal virtue. And there's two aspects that I really wanted to lift up as the importance anchor in prayer to action. And that is the first piece is okay, you read the book because there's other pieces that are also important, but I'm just picking out two this time, okay? So I won't feel like I've shortchanged you all. But the one I want to lift up, because it's really hard for us, progressives, is to touch the pain of the world as real. Touch the pain of the world as real. Not fix it. One of the challenges for progressives is we always want to fix it. I always have a policy plan, what legislation could be changed, how we could make this different. I know, I've got the ideas. But you know what happens when I do that part? Then it's about my plan and my control. Sometimes they're good ideas, and sometimes I need to act on it. But the first part is to let my heart be broken open by the pain of the world. Because if my heart is broken open, then I discovered I've got room for everybody. But as long as I'm protecting my heart, I don't want to get hurt. I want to be careful. I don't want to risk too much. As long as I'm careful, then my community is really small. But if my heart's been broken open by the pain of the world, by the guy in Michigan, and the Ohio guy telling me about how he felt like he hadn't played by the rules, he hadn't gotten ahead, he disappointed his parents. He lives in my heart. We disagree on everything, but he lives in my heart. Paul Ryan lives in my heart. Annoyingly, but lives in my heart. How do we let people in, and how does our suffering open us up to embrace more? And then out of that, touching the pain of the world as real, being aware that in relationship we have hope. In relationship, where we share that pain together. I bet a lot of you were at No Kings demonstrations last weekend. What a glorious, glorious experience to be on Pennsylvania Avenue here in DC and witnessing, but also talking about the hurt, the pain, being outside the Department of Justice. I mean, that's where I was in this huge crowd. We were outside Department of Justice. It was sort of injustice right now. But how important it is to be together to embrace the pain of the world as real, not lying to ourselves. But a broken heart that's broken open can welcome everyone in. So touch the pain of the world, have an active experience of hope, which is sort of, this is what we're doing here. But another piece that's really critically important is to have effective discourse across generations and cultures. Now, I don't want to say anything, but I just celebrated a birthday and I'm keenly aware of my gray hair. And on this crowd, I see several gray heads. So I think we have a responsibility to do missionary work to reach out to younger folks, to connect with younger folks, to be supportive to them in this very challenging time, to let them know they're not alone. and to help them with broken hearts too. Effective discourse across generations and cultures, races, variety. I believe hope requires us to break out of my fearful little box and connect. It makes me think of this one experience in Greensboro, where this woman came up to me after my thing, bookstore thing. She came up, she's very, very lovely Southern woman. She said to me, I thought I was coming to listen to a sister tell us about hope. But you know what you did? You showed us the hope we have here. It was a surprise, but thank you. I was so touched because it showed me the hope they had. I saw it, but that she saw it too. That's community. That's talking across culture and across generation, across divides. Our nation is desperate for risk takers to talk across divides. Missionaries for the common good. That's what we need. Well, touch the pain of the world is real. Effective discourse across generations and cultures. And I hate to tell you, but there's 5 of these, but the 5th one I find most annoying. And that is, for anybody that works in nonviolence, you all live this. And that is the capacity to sustain long-term tension with the dominant culture. The capacity to sustain long-term tension with the dominant culture. Well, I hate to tell you, you probably picked up on this, but our view is not exactly mainstream. We keep wanting it. I keep wanting it to get there. I think it ought to be there. It seems perfectly clear to me. But my politician friends, sometimes it feels like they pat me on the head and they say, Sister Simone, that's really nice. And then they chuckle. It's so good to have a faithful person around. But what I've realized is it's not about arriving. It's about the journey. It's the pilgrim people. The capacity to sustain long-term tension with the dominant culture. And right now, it's pretty difficult. But how do we keep talking about human beings and what human beings need and who we care for? How do we keep talking about embracing the pain of the world is real? Helping people risk acknowledging that theirs is not, they're not the norm necessarily for what people are suffering. And that negative judgments are eroding the reality of our nation. Some of you might get The Atlantic, but this current magazine that just came out a couple of days ago is all about the Revolutionary War, the 250 years. And it is profound for me. I haven't finished it. I've got about 20 more pages to go, but I'm reading it cover to cover. It's really captivating. But our form of government was never a guarantee that it would work. Everybody along the way has been afraid that it won't work. And right now I'm terrified that it's being destroyed by fascism, which our sister community in Eastern Europe has been teaching us about. But what I do know is that if you touch the pain of the world is real, and if we engage in this together, we can have an active experience of hope and shift the dynamic, shift the way forward. And so it brings me to the last story that I wanted to share in this part was a story about Flint, Michigan. Now, I don't know if we have any Michiganders on here, but we went to Flint at a bookstore downtown. This beautiful African American woman is creating a bookstore downtown as her side hustle and getting people to read. And she gave me this bag that says black, reading is the new black. And that the expectation of their African American community in Flint to be readers. And they've got reading days and they're doing reading weeks and they're doing all this amazing work to engage in creating community. But what I admired most about her was her sense of a missionary spirit to bring people in and make small communities. And so it was little small book club, a small book club of high schoolers, middle schoolers. And then my very, very favorite, I got to participate in the nursery schoolers that had some of those big, big, thick cardboard books, learning to read from the beginning. And there are statistics that say if a home has 7 books, the children will be successful. And so her goal is to get books into every home in Flint, to give Flint a new breath of life. Now look at that. Her heart was broken open. She's engaging the pain of the world is real. She's drawing in community, and all these ideas are flourishing. She is like this great example that hope is a communal virtue, and she's making change in Flint by getting books into the hands of kids. Isn't that cool? So how do we celebrate all of the fabulous things that you all are doing? Because my hunch is you're probably all engaged too, because none of us who have prayer practices are exempt from engagement. So I want to encourage you to know that the Spirit is alive and well in these times. In our time of desperation, this is a time for a new Pentecost. This is a time to listen deeply to the nudges, to the urgings, to the going towards what scares you. Because what I found when I went towards what scared me, worlds opened up. How exciting to find new worlds. But it requires movement out of my fear, in faith, trusting in the Spirit, to engage in a creative activity that I say is making hope happen. All right, let's open it up. I've probably given you enough to gnaw on, chew on, talk about. Is that okay, John?
It was more than okay. It was fabulous and moving and inspiring, Simone. Hey, everybody, a big round of applause for Sister Simone. Thank you for sharing all that. Uh, I have pages of notes, and I've heard you before, and I have your books, and I'm still learning. Um, let, I think what was so touching for me was that you model for us all the things you're trying to teach us.
Oh, that's
You
good.
have been showing us how you've done it. And that's not the way I work, Simone. I just try to yell at everybody and beat them into submission and force them to be nonviolent. And it's not working. Anyway, I heard you talk about vision, the willingness to face into what scares us. You talked about Jesus always getting close and proximity, and that when you get close, your heart softens and you're less judgmental. That's a very powerful teaching. And the challenge to work together to make a difference and shoulder to shoulder engaging in work for the poor. What is ours to do? And the only way forward is in community, and in community we find hope. So you talked about community and small communities. You talked about touching the pain of the world as real and not necessarily trying to fix it. That's such an important teaching. And having effective discourse across generations and races and cultures. But instead of telling us that, you were showing us how you did it. Literally, you went out and talked with people. And then the capacity to sustain long-term tension with the dominant culture. In other words, to keep at it for life and therefore to celebrate the good and the hope. I have lots of questions for you. I don't see any, or if any, in the chat. So we can both call on people here, Simone, but I always have about 37 questions for my friend who's speaking. So why don't, since I have the chair, why don't I begin? No,
What
let
a
me.
radical thought. That's very
Yeah.
good of you,
So,
John.
folks, you
Perfect.
better write something in the chat or raise your
Yeah, this will
yellow hand.
intimidate them. Yes.
Yeah, otherwise I'm going to keep talking and nobody wants that, starting with Simone. But let me, one of the things we're losing by the minute, and we've been at this a long time, is community. The church is collapsing. So the parish network is collapsing.
Yeah.
The family network is collapsing. Friends are collapsing. Families are like not talking to each other. And it's getting worse and worse by the day, this division and isolation, which is what fascism was. Now, in the 80s, when we were at this, there were small communities everywhere. A lot of it came from Latin America. But I see Pax Christi, its big network of small communities, is collapsing. Can you talk a little bit about how we can form community in a very concrete way? And it may be just as simple as, if we look, because this is what Dan Berrigan used to say, if you don't have a community, call up 7 friends and say, we're meeting on Thursday night for an hour, just to talk and read the gospel and what are we upset about and where do we find hope. And then we get together once a month. So we all, because things are going to be getting worse. And one of the main messages you've offered us is community is the way to sustain hope in our engagement. So I wonder how many people here, even on this Zoom, actually have community. What do you think about all that? How we can do that?
Well, I think a big challenge because
Yeah.
it is knowing the intimacy of proximity, of caring enough, just acknowledging the chat. It is the Atlantic. It's the new issue. There was a question in the chat about what magazine did I say? It's the Atlantic. But the thing about community that I think is that we think communities work. Let me be real. And it does take a commitment. And it does take, oh man, it's the first Wednesday and we promised that we would get together and I'd rather not. I'm kind of tired. But we have to work through that to get together because the urgency of now demands that we sacrifice in making community happen. I recently did a thing for Just Faith. I mean, that's one of the things Just Faith tries to do, that program where they reflect on scripture and social policy and all that. And they do it through parishes and churches. But one of the things they're having trouble with is that parishes and churches aren't so functional. And
Mhm.
so trying to figure out how do they have groups that are willing to commit to ongoing relationship. Um, One of the things that I've found helpful is to, if you want to start a group, is to say, for me, I'm a reader. So I'd like to read X book in a group. Would you join me? And it's got 10 chapters. So maybe we could do could we commit to 5 meetings once a month? 2 chapters a month. We could handle that. And where is it? I just got, oh, I put it out in the other room. Elizabeth Johnson's new book, which is about meditations on the gospel and the environment. It looks fabulous. Something like that. It's a small book. It doesn't look intimidating. Invite people over to talk about it, but then keep doing it because it's the challenge of staying at it. And that's one of the gifts about being in a religious community, is that we stay at it. We might annoy each other a lot, but we have a long history of staying together. And
Mm.
quite frankly, the current reality for my community, the current political reality, is uniting us in a way that we've never seen. It's kind of nice. It's kind of exciting. But you
Mm.
have to be able to talk to each other about what matters in order to get to that point. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it's all very helpful, and I think we all need the support of others and of like-minded people. And Latin America and Africa, they learned that long decades ago. You have to have base communities, and there's millions of them. We're headed that way with the collapse of our country. So Maria writes in for you, Simone, and I'm going to read her question in the chat. Maybe if I can. It says, well, what about when you approach someone from the other side? You're going to talk to a conservative and you're shut down. This is what you were talking about, by their scripted, pushing demeanor. How do we create a space for dialogue there? I mean, you gave us an example of that. You went and rethought, it was my agenda and I changed my agenda. That's kind of what you were doing.
Right, that I have to give up my perspective. But you know what I've found is that people like to have people curious about them and
Yes.
to be authentically interested. I mean, the virtue that I was kind of missed saying that it's critical is holy curiosity. Holy curiosity means that I hold you in holy reverence, and I'd really like to know what's happening. And that we get touched in that. Let me tell you what, one of the things that happened for me in talking to one of these conservative pastors, this pastor of a megachurch, and when he told me, oh no, he couldn't join us, he couldn't do this, I've never forgotten his response, because it was like, blew me away, is that he said, he's a pastor of a megachurch. He preached once on George Floyd, soon after George Floyd was murdered, and his church lost 250 members.
Mhm.
And he just couldn't do it. I mean, a mega church is dependent on mega, and so they couldn't lose 250 families. But to this credit, I was really impressed. They went and talked to these families to find out why, what was going on. I mean, I wanted to, if I'd been in my soapbox, wasn't that what Jesus did? Jesus talked about the conflict. I could have gone off, but trying to behold, have a heart open to his experience, to his struggle, was about curiosity and not about judgment. Um, it's really important to try to understand what's underneath that. And it was their business model. That was what was underneath it. It would undermine their business model. And for him, the gospel was about a business model. And then I wanted to say, but it seemed to me that Jesus kind of pushed the boundaries but I didn't say that part because that wasn't where I was called to be at that moment, but to hold empathy for him. Does that make
That's
sense?
Yes, thank you so much. It's such a powerful story. That's my life's experience, is that, I mean, in the Catholic Church too.
Oh my God, don't even get me going on the
The
Catholic
whole
Church.
point of a church is to keep it going and to make money. And so a pastor never says anything that's, quote, divisive, because people will leave, and you're trained to unite people, and that's not Jesus. I've come to bring division. You're lucky, Simone, because I'm getting a cough. Otherwise, I'd start preaching.
Oh, the spirit alive and well.
Yes. Hey. Everybody, Simone did two great podcasts with me, and I have to come back to that because I can't talk. Judith, unmute yourself and ask Simone your question. You all lucked out. It's the spirit again. Judith Valenti.
Okay. Hi, Sister Simone. Yeah, something that really I find so hurtful and disheartening is all the lies that are coming from the people who are in leadership roles and at the top, the president. For example, the people who went to the No Kings demonstration hate America.
Yeah, right.
My husband went with me. He's an elected judge. He's an elected Republican judge. He doesn't hate America, I never saw so many people carrying flags that wasn't the Fourth
Wasn't
of
it
July.
great? Yes.
So how do we deal? What do we do about this constant lying to counteract it? Um, you know, and these lies that keep getting repeated and repeated.
Right. Well, this is where I hold on to the idea that the truth will set us free. And that as long as they keep lying, they're tying themselves up in great bonds that are tripping them up all over. The problem is, okay, when it comes to me, the truth will set us free, I say, but first it's going to scare us to death. So the hard part is being willing to journey through the fear of the power of the lie. But if we model truth, if we show truth, there was one guy or a couple of people at No Kings and were carrying signs, "I've not been paid a dime to be here." Or another one said, "I'm a laid off federal worker. You could pay me if you want." But it was the truth is coming out. The problem is right now, the way I see it, is that it's the power is not the truth. And that's what's annoying me, is that the power is this divisive lie, co-opting, undermining, demoralizing, and that our faith response as the truth needs to stay anchored in hope together, because we know that that's a lie. It broke my heart to watch the East Wing of the White House be torn down, but I thought, how real? Because that was the door through which the people entered. That was the door you went through to go see the Christmas ornaments. That's the door that you go through. That's the door I went through to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, for heaven's sakes. It was the public's access way, and they tore it down. Isn't that powerfully symbolic?
Yeah.
So what we need to do, I think, that's why we need community, support each other in holding the truth, not to clobber them over the head as much as I would like to do it, but let the truth be a witness that's bigger and stronger and more dominant. And then on the bad days, I'll clobber them if I can. And then I'll repent. And repentance is good because you get closer to the divine that way too.
No, you're not going to clobber anybody.
I will. If I could. If I could.
A commercial announcement in case you don't know. So on the Nonviolent Jesus podcast, this past week, I've had part one of a conversation with Sister Simone. And on Monday, we have part two. And a lot of what you're hearing will go in even deeper there. So, for example, the previous comment she made, this is for everybody, to be authentically curious about the other. I asked her a lot about that, and she then told me about a Zen practice that she also has to help with all this. And so this is a commercial to say, I hope you all will go and listen to the two podcasts that I did with Simone to kind of take all this even deeper. Let me call on my friend John Yusanchek. John, I see you have a question. It's more of a comment too about, you know, priests and churches not wanting to lose people. What I wanted to say before was, do you remember the name of the guy, the famous preacher from Americus, Georgia, who wrote the Cotton Patch Gospels from the 40s? So he was this minister who was very prominent in the South and very radical, kind of a figure for Dr. King and personal friend of Jimmy Carter's and all. And he had
Clarence
this
Jordan.
huge, Clarence Jordan, thank you. He had a very big right-wing church. He was assigned in Americus, Georgia. He walked in and preached against racism, and the whole church left. Everybody left, and there were 5 people the next week, and he kept at it. And it's been such a model for me because eventually the numbers were twice as big. The hunger to hear the authentic truth of the gospel. So much so that it affected Dr. King and Jimmy Carter, like it gave courage. And he's a very rare example of just preaching and letting the chips fall and letting everybody leave and letting new people come in and the Spirit working. John, reflect with us on that for Sister.
Oh, well, sister, first of all, thank you for everything you shared, especially at the beginning. I was really moved by your confession at the beginning, because I have those thoughts and, I'm sure everybody does. And to, confess those to a community, I don't know, I just think that's so important and special. Thank you for that. Um, Yeah, my wife and I, Pax Christi has this novena that they do every Hiroshima anniversary. So 2 years ago, we volunteered to pass out some of the flyers at one of the local churches, and passing them out was met with a considerable amount of hostility from parishioners as they were coming out the door. So this year, when we were asked to do it again, Deb, who's on the call, we talked about it. We thought, do we really want to do this again? So nobody was saying anything from the pulpit. There's 5 churches here. They're all the same parish. They would just give a little tiny announcement about this event. So we decided to go to talk to the local Monsignor, and we actually ambushed him without making an appointment. We just showed up, and the secretary snuck us into the office. Actually, she agreed to kind of call us and tell us when he was going to be there, but she said, "Don't tell him I told you." So so we went and he showed up and he came into the conference room with his fist on the table and he was kind of intense, and then finally he relaxed and he listened to us and we talked about it. He actually brought up Jesus, which actually made me really happy. And because sometimes you never hear Jesus, but the outcome of that was that the distribution for us went better. And he did say a little bit more about it from the pulpit that particular Sunday. So I've this past week, another thing happened where in the parish bulletin, 2 times they referred to no mass on Monday, October 13th, because it's Columbus Day. Uh, Parish office is canceled because it's Columbus Day. I spent 20 years working with the native tribes here, and I found that to be just how can you not know that the state of Maine calls it Indigenous Peoples Days? I wrote another letter to him. I didn't talk to him about it in person. And then our bishop, God help us, our bishop wrote this letter in favor of J.D. Vance. This was a couple of months ago, John. I think I talked to you about this. And he was writing in support of the circles of love.
Oh no, the
Oh
Pope said it's
yes, oh
wrong.
yes. Well, I wrote to him too. I wrote a letter to him, and just in a nutshell, I said to him, that circle that's a archaic 4th century concept that doesn't apply today. And what it does do is it provides the theological underpinnings for Christian nationalism.
Amen.
So I didn't get a response from him. I got a response from the secretary. It was, "Thank you, the bishop read your letter." That was it.
Well,
So the church
I mean,
needs
I
work.
assume John, that Pope Francis said that J.D. Vance was wrong.
Yes, I know.
and sent a letter to all of the Catholic bishops in the US,
Yeah, yeah,
letting them know that.
yes, yeah,
Ugh.
yeah. Anyway,
Well, okay, but let me can I use that? Did I interrupt? I do jump.
oh,
Sorry.
sure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, can I tell you what my community's been doing? Because these are ideas to build community. Okay, so we're Sisters of Social Service. We were founded in Budapest, Hungary. Our foundress was the first woman in the Hungarian parliament. She was elected to parliament twice. She was voted out both times because she was difficult. She resisted Nazism, and then she resisted the rise of communism. So they voted her out both times. But so we've got politics in our bones. So in this administration, well, I kind of started it, but created a rapid response committee, and we've been doing a variety of actions to deal with these kinds of outrageous things. And what made me think of it was, John, when you were talking about outrageous statement by J.D. Vance, and then the Pope saying that he's wrong and sending a letter to the bishops. So what we did was we took the Pope's letter, made copies of it, and we had our sisters send letters with the Pope's letter to our local ordinary, to our local bishops, saying, we wanted to make sure that you saw what Pope Francis said and encourage you to speak out about the truth of the gospel. We're really looking forward to hearing your, your plans and or to experiencing your actions to realize what the gospel means in these times. And it's been really interesting because some of our sisters got letters back. A bunch of them didn't. I got a handwritten note from Cardinal McElroy, who's brand new here in DC, but it's because he knows our sisters in San Diego and San Francisco. But the thing is that we can be missionaries to our people too,
Mm.
and expect more of them. I have a hunch it's sort of like, especially now that we're older, we could say, we're really disappointed in your leadership. We're looking for more.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. Thank you, John, and thank you, Simone. I think it's been a failing among us, as whatever you call us, progressives or liberal church people, for decades. And forgive me for this, but I think we're all so angry and disappointed that so many have walked away from talking with their priest or their bishop. Whereas I hear you today saying, look, if you want hope, you got to take a risk and do something hopeful. And that means talking with the other side. And, when you asked about, well, what does it scare me? That was such a teaching moment, because you were talking about yourself. And I was asking myself, I can do anything. You can shoot me, send me to life in prison. Fine. Love it. But I don't want to speak to a bishop. And I've spoken, it was my childhood fear to address the bishops' conference, and I've met many, many, many. And then I see that, when I lived in El Salvador, the Jesuits who were later killed told me how much they hated Romero. You couldn't get a greater fascist. He was evil. And they refused, they told me this, to have anything to do with this horrible right-wing pious guy who served the death squads, except for their friend, the radical, Rutilio Grande. And he went and met Romero for coffee every Saturday in the 2 months after he became Archbishop. And then Rutilio was assassinated. And it was when Romero saw the dead body of Rutilio Grande, John Sobrino said to me, he saw Romero become Jeremiah
Change.
before his eyes. And it was only because of the reaching out. The same then happened with Hunthausen, who was a horrible guy, actually. And Jim and Shelley Douglas met with him, and then he called the Trident submarine base the Auschwitz of Puget Sound. And they got rid of him on different questions, but it was really about the Trident. And we could go on, and I'm trying to reflect with you, Simone, because you're challenging me that, it's hard to talk to Republicans, let's say, But for starters, we can all talk with our priests and bishops, and no one will ever change unless we actually talk to them and unless ordinary lay people talk to them. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I agree. But I think what we have to face is who, and this is a question in prayer, where am I called? It's easier for me to deal with Paul Ryan
Yeah,
or,
that's what
you
I
know,
was getting at. Yeah.
yeah, I'm political. And the church makes me mad. I mean, if I
Right.
wasn't a member of my community, I wouldn't have anything to do with the church, quite frankly. But the fact is, it's an alternative lever to make the gospel real if we engage, if we're called to engage there. But I think everybody has to know where they're called and to respond, because where you're called, you're given opportunities. You're given opportunities to respond. And so it's just about saying yes, showing up, walking willing. That's how I describe my spirituality, as walking willing,
It's
willing to do what comes. So I haven't, I sent Cardinal McElroy a thank you note, but I haven't met him. I haven't done any of the work of that. But I was doing a press thing, and a bunch of members of Congress were there. And I realized I'm nourishment for them. They need to be
yes,
nourished. And so
yes.
that's the place where I'm drawn, called, engaged. And I I don't know. I used to think I was timid, but I'm not,
You're
Be-
not.
because that's where I'm called. I'm
Yes, thank
responding
you
to the
for reminding
Spirit
me.
in the moment of where I'm called. And opportunity is given. You just have to walk in. That's all you have to
Well,
do. Walk in.
you're reminding us of meditation, leading the spirit, and following the call. Thank you for that. I know McElroy very well. Please go and meet him. He actually would love to be with you, and he's a
Oh,
good
I,
guy.
I don't doubt that. I don't
You
doubt that.
already have an in though, because he's not responding to a lot of people. Like he's not responding. I know him. He's not going to be on my podcast, but he will. He needs to be with you.
He needs to be
Um,
nourished. Yeah.
yeah. So what I want to ask for one or two more comments or questions, and you're it's all beautiful. What about starting Nuns on the Bus again? I mean, things are going to be getting worse, and I realize, probably a horrible full-time experience, but you
Oh
went around
no,
the
it's
country and you
sacred.
really set a fire. A lot of
Well, okay,
people.
but here's the thing. Just because it worked doesn't mean it's to be repeated. And the piece is, for me, it came out of prayer, and it came out of Pentecost. Okay, you know how it got started? It
Remind
was
me.
uh, we had the censure by the Vatican that named our little organization that had 9 full-time staff at that moment as being a bad influence on Catholic sisters, because we promoted radical feminist themes incompatible with the gospel. It was like liar, liar, pants on fire, really. But we had all this notoriety. And so my prayer became, how do we use this moment for mission? And
That's a
because
great
we had
question.
just had our 40th anniversary, and the big question was, how do we get the name out there? We've been working on Capitol Hill for 40 years. How do we let people know? The Vatican answered our prayer. Do we send them a thank you note or a gift membership? I don't know. But the whole point was that their attention gave us this notoriety. And then I called together all of our secular colleagues, because our faith colleagues were so depressed. So the secular colleagues, what do we do with this? And they said, go on the road, push back against
Wow.
the Orion budget, lift up the works of Catholic sisters. And Nuns on the Bus was the joke name. It was a joke. I was afraid that it would get used like Nuns on the Run, that people would make fun of it. But then the design comes back for the bus, and it goes, Nuns on the Bus, big, huge letters, drive for faith, family, and fairness. Anyway, that was supposed to be the tagline, but it was the spirit. Whatever happens in an hour and a half meeting? In an hour and a half meeting, we were going on the road, pushing back against the Ryan budget, lifting up the works of Catholic sisters. And I said we couldn't go public till we had the money, because money had been so bad, and we had to raise $250,000. We had the money in 10 days. It was Pentecost. It was total Pentecost. So we have to listen to that. Just because it worked once doesn't mean it'll work again.
Well,
It's
you're reminding, you sat
Yeah.
with the question, how do we go forward with this opportunity? And we can all do that and see that this horrible time is an opportunity. It's very hard to get beyond ourselves and think that. Does anybody else have a pressing question or comment for Sister Simone Campbell? Raise your hand. Frank, is that you? Go ahead, Frank, and then Jamie, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Frank. Yeah, I think you have.
While he unmutes, I have a poem to end with.
Okay, great. And remind me, Simone, that I let you have a
Let me
chance to
finish.
read your poem. Go
Can you
ahead, Frank.
hear me, Father?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Sister, thanks so much. Really appreciate it, especially the comment about go to where you're scared. Ivana Hughes, who's the president of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, had been invited to be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And she was, I think, a bit apprehensive about doing that, but nevertheless agreed to appear with him. And it was a remarkable experience because it engaged two people that probably normally wouldn't have engaged with one another. And he asked very, I think, sincere questions that were on his mind. And in her answers, and it's about an hour and a half conversation, I think she presented the clearest, most comprehensive, most persuasive arguments about why we should abolish all nuclear weapons. And I think they really connected. I think he really had his questions answered and they had their give and take. And I think it took a lot of courage on her part. And I would invite people to watch their conversation. It's available on YouTube. It's a Tucker Carlson interview. But again, it really was a connection between two individuals that would be, worlds apart.
Thank you. Thank you,
Amen.
Frank. Before we respond to that, let's hear quickly from Jamie, if you had a comment or question for Sister Simone. Are you there, Jamie? Listed as Zoom user, maybe
I think he's having a problem getting between his video
Any
and his audio.
comments or thoughts there, Simone? Or you can go ahead and read the poem. Oh, wait, here's Jamie. Do you have a comment, Jamie?
He can't get off mute, which
He
is
can't get off mute. He keeps going into, I'm going to try to ask him to unmute. That didn't work.
There we go. Okay.
There you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm 86 years old and I have an iPhone 8. Does that explain it?
No, we're all old.
Yeah. My big issue right now is the 8th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. And why it is that the Pope doesn't speak out to that, because when I talk to my family and relatives, it's almost like you need an intervention because of the brainwashing of the continuing lies that they're absorbing over these last few years. And so if you think of the steps of information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and transformation, that first step of the information is so faulty and so erroneous and so dangerous. So that the 8th commandment to me is almost in some ways a parallel to the problem of thou shalt not kill, because it's so harmful. I wonder if you could speak to that, please. And thank you so much, sister.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I mean, I'd never thought of it in terms of the 8th commandment. That's interesting. But you have to realize this president is the guy who held the Bible upside down and didn't know he didn't have it right and tries to refer to it and doesn't have a clue. So I don't think we can expect it from him. But I do believe that that is something that church leadership could speak to. That is something that we can speak to. That is something that in our parishes we could speak to. And one of the ways I know most preachers don't like, would not think of calling out the administration as liars. I mean, it would be tempting to stand in the pulpit. I got to give a sermon once up at Princeton, and they have this pulpit that's a 16th century pulpit from someplace, and you climb like 20 stairs to get up in the pulpit, and then you proclaim. It was like, that's not the kind of preacher I am at all. It was like too much, but wouldn't that be fun? A liar from something like that. But I don't think that'd be effective.
I tried it. It didn't go over that well.
It doesn't go over. It doesn't go. But I think that's why relationship is important, so that people hear that's not true. There are alternatives. And that's why an organization like networklobby.org is a great resource, because they publish what is true, what is going on. So here's a resource for you. You might want to check it out. And sometimes with relatives, you don't get very far. I'm the oldest in my family, and so my younger siblings, it's like, oh yeah, there she goes again. But if I give them a resource they can check out, then it's not me, it's independent. So you have to think strategy too. Who could they hear from? Who could they hear from? That's why we need community.
You have a poem?
I have a poem. It's actually one I know. It's one I wrote. Some of you may have heard it, because I say it a lot, because I think it really fits who we are at this time. And it's called Loaves and Fish. It's based on the gospel. Remember where Jesus, everybody's out in the desert, and the apostles say, send them back to town. They're getting grumpy. They're hungry. And Jesus says, feed them yourselves. And good old Peter, my patron, I'm Simone for Simon Peter, says, well, all we got are a couple of day-old loaves of bread and a couple of stinky fish. What's that among so many? And Jesus must have been really frustrated. Oh, brother. So he has everybody sit down in groups of 50, ever the community organizer, making community. And then he blesses the bread, breaks it, and he shares it around. Now, Matthew's gospel says 5,000 men were fed, to say nothing of the women and children. Well, when I read that made me angry, might even called pissed off, because what are we, chop liver? Say nothing of the women and children. So as you can tell, I have this odd prayer life. So I prayed about it. And what I learned was Matthew only counted the ones who thought it was a miracle, and that was all the guys. The women brought snacks from home, and they knew the real thing was sharing. That's how we got it done. Anyway, so here's the poem that goes with that. I always joked that the miracle of loaves and fish was sharing. The women always knew this. But in this moment of need and notoriety, I ache, tremble, almost weep at folks so hungry, malnourished, faced with spiritual famine of epic proportions. My heart aches with their need. Apostle like I whine, what are we among so many? The consistent 2000 ever new response is this: blessed and broken, you are enough. I savor the blessed, cower at the broken, and pray to be enough.
Wow. Dear friends, join me in thanking Sister Simone Campbell for sharing all this wisdom and insight, and as I keep saying, modeling for us how to engage and share. And you kept pointing back to Jesus and meditation and discernment and the Spirit. Thank you. Friends, I hope you all get her book, Hunger for Hope. And again, you can get a 30% discount if you call or go to orbisbooks.com. I'm pretty sure it's TBC. It might be TBA is the secret code. And Please go this week and listen to the 2 episodes of my podcast, which is happening right now, the Nonviolent Jesus podcast with Sister Simone, who will go a little deeper into all of the points that she made. We really thank you, Simone. You really inspired all of us. I know you inspired me, and your
Oh,
questions were really helpful. And I'm glad it's going to live on in YouTube later on. And I'll send you all the recording link in a couple of days or two. Can I just give you a little commercial? I'm going from Sister Simone Campbell. This is just total name dropping. Sister Simone Campbell this week on the podcast, to next week is Joan Baez. Had a great hour with her, and uh, she read her poem she just wrote and then sang to me and talked about hope. And then I have Dr. Ivana Hughes, who's the head of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation that Frank was talking about.
right.
She's one of the key leaders in the U.S. Working in the UN on the treaty to ban the nuclear weapons. It's very important to listen to. The next Zoom, I think on November 15th, is with Jim Finley, who's returning to talk about the mystical roots and dimensions of peace and nonviolence. Please come back for that. And then the last one, some of you are here for, and Simone, if you wanted to come at any of these free, just send me an email. The weekend before Christmas, Elizabeth Johnson and I are going to have a conversation about Christmas and the theology of incarnation. I have no idea what that means. And so she's going to explain it all to us, especially within the framework of universal love, compassion, and the coming of peace on earth. Isn't that wonderful? So she's great, you all, like Simone. So you can all help me by promoting the beatitudecenter.org and all your lists and the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. We have thousands of people listening for free. It's global. It's on many, many sites and platforms all over the world, and the front page of the National Catholic Reporter every Monday. So please, but we don't have any promotion other than word of mouth. So thank you for that. Simone, thanks for being
Thank
here.
you.
Have a great weekend. I'm going to write you a note. I'll have more work for you in the future. And if I can ever do anything for you, let me know. Anybody want to
Thank you.
stay on for a few minutes with me? You're very welcome. We'll take Simone's poem as our closing prayer, and I'll say God bless to everybody. And I'm going to turn off the recording, say adieu to Simone, and see you all next time. Bye bye, and God bless everybody.